Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to what's now the 6th of our RTI webinars. What I propose to do is just run through, show you the basics of what RTI involves, and then we'll come to your questions. Basically, for those of you already running MyPAYE, the first change that you will really see is when you come to run your end-of-year submission this year. Normally when you run that, it runs through the process, and at the end you get a page that comes up and says you've successfully done it. You can print your P45s and your P35, P60s and P35 reports, and there's an update payroll button. Normally that update payroll button just updates tax codes and then takes you back into the home page ready to run payrolls for the following year. This year there is an additional process that will come up because as part of RTI there are some additional bits of information that HMRC are requiring us to provide for each employee. So if I just go, I can't show you the actual year-end process because of the I haven't got a year-end to do at this stage, but I will show you the questions that you're going to get asked and explain what they're there for. I'm using the test version of MyPAYE just so that I can do submissions without generating real submission data for companies. So if we go into our test company, run the payroll, select an employee, edit them. These are the two additional questions. The first one is the normal hours worked. As part of the information required to run the new universal benefit system that's being introduced, HMRC are now requiring all employers to indicate the normal hours worked for an employee. What that should be is effectively what they're contracted to do. It doesn't have to change every week if someone one week works a lot of overtime and not another. Basically what they want to know is what are their normal hours, and they want that banded as to either up to 16 hours, 16 to 30 hours, or 30 hours or more. There is also an other stroke irregular flag which is there for people who are not paid regularly, and I'll come back to that because it has some fairly significant implications for certain types of employees, and we'll talk about that later on through the presentation. The other piece of information that you've got to provide is the UK residency status of all of your employees, whether they're a UK resident or whether they are here seconded from overseas, and also if they're seconded from overseas or whether they are a resident or a citizen, of the European Economic Area, EEA. As part of the year-end process, what will happen is the system will give you radio buttons to select the default option for all of your employees. So for most employers who've got people who are UK resident and working the same basic hours each week, they're all maybe 30 hours or more, you can select the radio button setting, click all the same, and the system will set up all your employees in one go. If you've got some employees who work different hours or have different residency statuses, you can click that there are mixed settings, and it will then populate all the employees with the default that you select and give you a list of all of the employees on the screen, so you can just quickly click the radio button setting for those employees who have to have a different process. Once that's been done, then you're ready to run RTI with one minor addition on the employer details. Not content with just having the tax references and your accounts office reference, there's now a requirement to provide either your corporation tax reference if you're a company, or your universal tax reference if you're a self-assessment partnership or sole trader. There is a question mark. The question's been asked a couple of times during these webinars that we're trying to clarify. What do you do if you're a charity and have neither of those? And we will be putting some guidance out as soon as we can get clarification from HMRC. So you need to fill that in before you can do your first submission. Basically, once that's done, RTI is actually very simple. You run your payroll exactly as normal, set your hours up each week or each month, run the payroll, put your data in as normal. At the end of the payroll run, there is now an additional button that appears, which is to post your payment details for that payroll to HMRC. You can post it at that point. The only risk is that if you then subsequently come to rerun the payroll, you'll obviously have to resubmit the data again. And we have some reservations from information we've received from HMRC as to how well geared up they are to getting lots of resubmissions and not changes, because unlike the year-end process where there was a definite file for submission and a file for amendments, with RTI they're saying they will treat the first submission for any particular payroll in a period as being the full file, and anything subsequently should be an amendment. Sounds reasonable, until someone at a webinar we attended recently said, what do you do if you've got your database crashes and you have nothing to compare from? You can only resubmit the whole data. And the comment was, oh, don't worry, we'll be able to detect that. I have grave doubts that they will be able to detect that, and I suspect resubmission of the same data for the payroll when it's rerun may be an issue in the first few months of RTI, and therefore what we're recommending is that it's probably safer to run your payroll at that point, do your normal printing, click finish, give your employees their pay slips, make sure that everything's okay, and then if there are no changes needed, then you go to the pay summaries, select the month, and do the post from the pay summaries page off the view reports. Basically, you just click continue, click the button, it builds your submission, submits it, takes 10-15 seconds to do the actual submission process. There may also be an advantage in doing this other than on a Thursday afternoon or a Friday morning when everybody's trying to run weekly payrolls. And there we are, that's my submission done. For most people, that's all you need to do to run RTI. The initial setup and then run that. If you've got two payrolls, then you have to make a submission for each payroll as you run it. So if you're running weekly and monthly, there's a weekly submission from your weekly payroll and a monthly submission from your monthly payroll. The other major thing that HMRC has added to RTI is the ability to check employees' national insurance numbers. In the past, if you didn't have a national insurance number, the only way was to ring them up and go through a lengthy process. Now, when we put a new employee in, the system automatically keeps a record of them, and you can ask the system to send a verification request for certain employees to HMRC. So we had a question from somebody this morning who has an employee who works overseas. They used to work for one of the banks. They've got an old temporary national insurance number, which is no longer valid and can't be used in the UK any longer. What I've said to him is he should put the employee in without the ENI number, submit a verification request, and once you do that submission, then in your normal HMRC notices, which the system picks up for you every month, when you go and view those notices, you should get, after a few days, a notice of national insurance number to be used. If you display that, it will then tell you what number you originally sent them and what the corrected one is, and you can apply that to the employee record as you can with tax code changes, etc., just by clicking the apply to employee record. These are all test ones, so they won't actually appear in my database, but very simple. Means you can now verify a national insurance number. For the ones that you're happy with and you don't feel you need to verify, just click on the ignore button and continue, and it will mark them that they're no longer needed, and that will disappear off the list. So that's broadly RTI. The only areas of where it gets a little more complicated, if you are running construction industry scheme systems, MyPAYE, you can do the CIS functionality for you, and you continue to submit your normal monthly CIS returns. The only addition is that if you're trying to claim back the deductions that you've suffered as a subcontractor from your contractors when they've paid you. If you want to claim that back, have it offset against the NI tax that you're paying to HMRC, you need to put that in through the view reports on the statutory returns, and then you have to submit an employer payment summary return every month, which is an employer level payment status, and it tells HMRC the information about CIS deductions. Similarly, if you are not paying anybody in a particular month, classic one being a one-man company where the director's paid once per annum, you will need to do 11 employer payment summaries to say there is a nil return, otherwise you can be fined for not making a submission. And that brings me on to this irregular payments indicator. HMRC has done away with the submission of P45 and P46 with RTI. So when you get someone leaving you, you still produce a P45, but you hand it to them, you don't submit it to HMRC. It goes in the final payment submission for that employee. And similarly, when someone joins you, there is no more P45, P46 submission. You merely fill in the information from the P45 or from the equivalent of a P46 in terms of the questions you have to ask them about, is it your main job, etc. Exactly the same as the old P46 form. And that gets sent to HMRC. However, they've decided that if you don't pay someone for 3 months, and that window may change, but at the moment it's we understand it's a 3-month window. If you haven't paid someone for 3 months, they assume that they've left your employment and they remove them from your payroll records. So it's very important for anybody that you employ who may only work for you on a part-time basis. Classic ones are directors paid once a year, or somebody who comes in part-time to provide cover for, say, a receptionist or something, and only comes in at certain times of the year, or seasonal staff who work for you when there's work but do something else in the winter, for example. If you don't mark their employment hours worked as irregular, then HMRC will assume that you haven't paid them, that they've left your employment. So that irregular indicator is extremely critical for anybody who's paid intermittently. You must mark their hours as irregular, otherwise you will have problems and the employee will have problems when you try and pay them eventually, because there won't be an employee on your record any longer. That, I think, is the major part. We were asked this morning about help information. There is already help in the system for HMRC RTI. It's still being updated because HMRC are changing the information on an almost daily basis. We will, as a result of all these webinars, be updating this to try and put as much guidance on there as we can. And where practical, we'll provide links to HMRC pages. My only hesitation with those is that they have a habit of removing the page and redoing it subsequently. So our links sometimes don't work, but we will try and put guidance links wherever possible. That really is how simple RTI is on MyPAYE. It's not frightening, it's not complicated.